So I'm pleased to be joined also by Glenn, who's the Regional Engineering Operations Manager for Ocado here in South East London. So Glenn, can you just tell us a little bit about how the site team was involved in the project and what role did they play?
Yeah, sure. So the team were involved from the outset, so that was important for us that they were brought in straight away. So we involved them in the initial analysis week when everybody gathered together and we analysed some of the opportunities that we had within the CFC. And then from then on, those people that were involved in that week then went on to be the leads of some of the areas that we wanted to address. And they are the people that were leading are also the managers of the teams. So to do that, they could also get their teams on board as well as part of that.
Excellent. And we have over 100 people across the shifts.
Yeah.
And we had four different shifts working all in parallel.
Yeah.
And can you just tell us how all the shifts collaborated together and how was it involved in terms of the management and mission control? Yeah,
sure. So the managers, the leads were leading the projects were the engineering operations managers. And as you said, there's 4 shifts, approximately 30 people per shift. And basically they were leading various project streams that we were working on. And in doing that, they were also involving their team and all the 4 teams as well, so we could get collaboration across all the 4 shifts.
We had several projects. Could you just give us a little bit of detail as to some of the initiatives that were taking place here over the last 12 months? Yeah,
sure. So the projects were all areas that we saw as opportunities. So some of those were around the way that we did the work that we carry out on the robots, about altering the way in which we work and maintain on the robots. So that was really altering the workplace, the layout of the workplace to make it more efficient so that people could do the tasks on the robots and had all the tools and the robots were in the right position, and it just made it much more efficient, all about labour productivity. Secondly, we standardised the work, so we wanted people across the 4 shifts, as we said, to very much be a standardised approach. So we put in place some templates for them to work to, for the managers, the leads and even the people, so that they're doing much more standard work and it's the same and repeated across the shifts. And then some other areas we looked at was how we address faults that perhaps appear on the robots, and how we would best solve those with the most efficient use of people's time, really, in terms of fault finding on the robots.
No project is without its challenges. Can you just tell us a little bit, or give us some examples of some of the challenges faced here in Ocado over the last 12 months?
Yeah, well, I think the last 12 months have been pretty difficult for not just Ocado, but for everyone across the world, obviously, with the COVID pandemic. That in itself presented a number of problems for the projects that we were doing, from people availability, obviously, with COVID, from some of the parts and some of the materials that we needed to implement some of the improvement projects we were working on. And even just in terms of, getting people together for meetings and things, because the face-to-face meetings weren't that used that often during the COVID pandemic. It was mainly around Zoom calls and things like that, so many challenges around that. Also in terms of working across 24/7 4 shifts, there's some challenges in terms of communication and how you get everybody on board and bought into the projects and what's going on. We found the mission control area that we established to be very useful for that, because basically we could take people, it's right there, it's at the workplace, they don't have to travel far to it. It's very visual, so it's easy for people to understand what we're doing, what we're aiming to, what the targets are for the projects, but also the progress and the next steps for the projects. So we used that a lot to make sure that we communicated the projects with the team, and that helped overcome some barriers of people not being involved or perhaps not knowing what's going on.
And this site is one of the earliest sites. There's people here that have developed from trainees to technicians to engineers.
Yeah.
Can you just tell us, we had a challenge with some very good resources who were involved in the projects, obviously going elsewhere in Ocado Group as well. That was a challenge.
Yeah, we did. I mean, we had a lot of people that were involved at the outset as the project, was over several months, and which was great for them in terms of their development. It gave them a chance to, raise their profile within Ocado, And also some of the tools and techniques they learned sort of put them in a position to progress. So although it was a good problem to have, we did have several people that came through the projects, even some people that were involved in leading the projects, and then it moved on through Ocado, which is great in terms of Ocado and sort of progression and putting people into future management positions. So although it was a challenge for us, it was a nice problem to have.
That's good. Yeah. Can you explain the role that Kaizen Institute played and how you found that from your perspective in Ocado?
Yeah, I mean, Kaizen Institute were obviously instrumental in what we did. I mean, they what they bring about is a great rigour and discipline in terms of making sure that we stay on track with what we agree to do and what we're trying to do. It's very easy in the sort of melee of day-to-day operations to get distracted with things, but what Kaizen bring about is a great rigour and discipline to make sure you stick to the task. And also, because the Kaizen Institutes were working alongside us, working in the mission control, working at the workplace, they're very visual, very accessible to the team as well. It's a great opportunity to get team members of all levels, managers right through the team, involved in the projects as well. So a great collaboration, lots of good tools and techniques that Kaizen bring to you, and in terms of problem solving and working your way through some issues that you wouldn't probably know yourselves perhaps. So it was very, 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 very useful for us.
Could you tell us a little bit about some of the sort of intangible benefits that you've seen come through as a result of taking part in this Kaizen project?
Yeah, I think some of the benefits that come along are obviously, we've got quite a large team, as we said, over 100 people. It's an opportunity for people to get involved in that, and from getting involved, they start to pick up and learn some of the tools and techniques. It opens the possibility to making suggestions from people and then following them through with some ownership and following those through into A3s and making those projects happen. The A3 itself just provides such a logical sort of problem solving that can be applied to a whole range of different problems. And from that, we've had several of the team members that have identified something that could be improved, or in their view could be improved, worked with the managers and produced their own A3s. It leaves a long-lasting structured problem-solving methodology that the team can use in the future when they need to.
And long-term, obviously you have the mission control and you have the daily Kaizen, and also commission buys. How do you see these tools helping you sustain the changes and improvements that you've made?
Yeah, I think they are key, and as you say, sustaining is the key to making sure we do that. I think they can be built on as well, so as time goes on, especially as the team's been exposed to the Kaizen principles, that we know if we think we can improve some of those commission buys or some of those checks or put some more in, then we can definitely do that. But yeah, it's key now that the managers, the leads and people take ownership and own the process and keep making sure we're doing what we said we're doing.
Okay, so we've come to the end of the first phase of the Kaizen project. Can you just explain how that was concluded and what next steps there'll be? Yeah,
sure. So at the end we carried out a value review, so we got all the stakeholders and some of the people that have been involved in the projects together. As we said, carried out the value review, looked at what we'd achieved and how far we'd gone with the targets, and quantified that in terms of financial benefit, which is important. And then from there we set about our next phase, so the next projects that we wanted to attack, and a very similar approach, set ourselves some targets, decided the team leads, decided the people would be involved, and we're embarking on them, and they're due to come to an end in early 23. And I think once we've done that, we'll just repeat that again and keep looking at the next things that we want to go after in terms of targets. Apply the same methodology whilst making sure we're sustaining what we've already achieved, and just keep pushing to do that. And also there's an opportunity for us to share some of the things we've done here with some of the other CFCs that may be able to take them directly or take the principles behind them and benefit from them. So I think one thing you mentioned earlier was that the day-to-day operation must continue, but do you see now this continuous improvement culture as part of your day-to-day operation? Yeah, definitely. I think it's sort of baked into the way that we do things now, which is fantastic. As I said, and it's all about sustaining that now, making sure the commission buys are there, and then introducing more people to it, as well as we get new team members. A chance to take them to the mission control, which we've still got, talk them through the visual standards, so we can bring new people on board with it as they join the business as well. Danny, thank you for joining me.
Could you just tell us a little bit about how the project started out and your role through the last 12 months?
So when you guys came, over a year ago now, we started doing some exercises with the potential leads of the projects. Once we decided who's going to be leading what area, we then went to the shop floor to actually see what the current state of things were, what areas could be improved. We've done some observations, done some spaghetti diagrams, and off the back of that we started putting together what improvements could be made.
And then in terms of your particular shift, so you look after 2 shifts here on site,
Yeah.
which is around 60 people.
Yeah, roughly.
How did you sell the project to them in terms of the mission control and getting them involved in the day-to-day workings of the last 12 months?
Yeah, so we took the teams to the mission control rooms, which laid out clearly what we wanted to achieve, and the sort of steps that we were going to take to get there, and the reason behind why we were doing the changes. So I think we took all the teams there, took them around mission control, got them to sign off that they were happy that they were going to be on board with what we were doing, and I think that gave the transparency that they wanted, because a lot of people were interested in it, but they didn't know what it all meant. And so once we explained it and they knew what we wanted to achieve and how we were going to do it, it was easier for them to buy in with what we wanted to get changed, especially with the layout design, which is what one of the projects that I was doing.
And can you just explain sort of the reasoning behind your particular project on the layout design? So what was the thinking behind that, and just high level what was achieved as a result?
Yeah, so CFC4 Erith's a huge site. A lot of the observation we done, we knew in the past as well, but it was good to get it documented through the Kaizen way. So we use we have 4 maintenance areas. We use 2 that are very far away from the stores, for example. It's hard to manage those teams, so we started off by moving those to one area, so it's easier for us to manage them. It's closer to the stores, less time and motion waste, less bot hoist move, less pallet use. We had an area called the BTZ, which was previously used or unused as a maintenance area, which we then reclaimed as a maintenance area. So what we were losing in one area, we gained in another. And for doing various track layouts, cage layouts, we were able to service our equipment whilst not having to go on the grid. So currently, or the current state was, we had to wait for a recovery window to go on the grid and service the graphs, MRBs, things like that. Whereas now we have an off-grid space that we can do that at any time at our leisure. So it just saves a lot of on-grid waste that we can do off-grid.
And in terms of performance across the shifts, not just your shift, but the other shifts as well, what have you seen in terms of efficiency of repair and the performance of the assets, the bots?
Yeah, so one of the KPIs we were looking at was the mean time to repair. I think the current state was like 2.2, 2.4. We got that down to 1.6, I believe, and that was purely through, again, removing that waste of the time and motion, having the parts available there, having the tools available there. In their work area. So as before, there was a lot of tools that would be missing or not available. The parts were not readily at hand. You'd have to walk to the stores, and people may get distracted if they're waiting for other people to go and get all their tools as well. So yeah, closer tools, available tools, closer parts, closer working closer to the work area, all reduce the mean time repair. Also, we were looking at costs as well, so cost per bot, the average cost per bot, and the de-inducts as well. We wanted to reduce the amount of de-inducts we were having off the grid. So we drove that through another project, which was looking at the fault tree, the repairs, what we can do better. Sometimes the fault tree step was step number 9 would fix it, so we'd move that to the top so people would fix it right first time, and that keeps our bots running on the grid longer.
And on top of the ones you've already mentioned, as a grid lead, could you, as a shift manager, you lead start of shift meetings, and that format was changed to adopt the daily Kaizen format. Can you just explain a little bit about the elements of daily Kaizen and what benefits you've seen as a result of adopting that process?
So I think before you came, we had start shift briefs, but they weren't structured and didn't contain many KPI data or much KPI data. Since doing the daily Kaizen, we can show our teams anything to do with safety, any handover documentation, any safety updates we can put on there. We have the metrics on the board now, so the guys can see how they're performing over the past 20 shifts to see if we're increasing or decreasing bots. We've got bag numbers on there as well. We've got percentage of bots improved over 80%, which we never had before. So it's just good visual metrics and data that people can see now, and it's engaged. We also have a PDCA board there to try and engage with the teams more, so they can, every day it's visible to see how many we've had like in the past month, and we're always asking for more and more, and these are just quick jobs that will help improve the site on a daily basis.
On top of all those other projects that you've mentioned, we did some leader standard work and some Gemba walk routes, as well as some commission buys, which are visual audits for the shop floor. Could you elaborate and tell us a little bit about why those tools were adopted and what benefits you've seen from following those?
Yeah, so with the leader standards work, I think you spent some time with all of us to document what we've done on a daily basis. I think all the shifts we're doing roughly there or thereabouts the same, but with the leader standardship, it was more of in a structured way, which helped us because we have a lot of step-ups that don't quite know what we do in our role. So it's handy to give them like a daily check sheet and say, this is what we do. With the commission buys as well, again, it's just keeping that quality and high standards going with the bot inducts or the part storage, just making sure that the guys have the right tools available, because if we're not on top of it, then it will just fall apart. Again, the whole metrics of the KPI, well, the main KPI with Kaizen was to get the mean time to repair low. So the commission buy introduced to that was doing some general checks around the bot. And that's slowly filtered down to our area leads and then just the general bot fixers who will do that because they know that we'll be checking those things. I think Kaizen also gave us some commission buys with QR codes on. So what was an issue that we found, like a lessons learned, is when we were doing the commission buys, not everyone was filling out with a pen and wiping the board. But with the QR codes, we could scan it and do it on our phones through the form, so it was a lot easier.
That was great. And like you said, by doing those checks, you're seeing more stability, the behaviour's filtering down, and obviously that's going to help you long term sustain the benefits. In terms of a next step, so obviously we finished cycle 1. Mm-hmm. Can you just tell us how we finished cycle 1, how did we wrap that up, and then what's the new challenge coming forward to the end of 2022 and start of 2023?
Yeah, so at the end of the first year, we had like a wrap-up meeting with all the key stakeholders and people higher up in the business. We just presented all of our projects to them, where we were at the start, what we've done, and then where we are in we're present day. And it got good buy-in, I think, from the key, like I say, the higher stakeholders. So we've started a second year of Kaizen. With that, we're trying to be even better, one of the Ocado values. So the mean time repair target is even lower this time. The index per 1,000 bot hours is lower, and the cost average per bot is lower as well. So we're just trying to improve on what we've already improved on. Alongside that, we've sort of in-house carried on with other projects related to bagging machines and peripherals. So adopting the same way, so using the commission buys that we've set up with your help. So we can check our peripheral areas and bagging areas, and just general standards like tool standardization in those areas, 5S, visual management, things like that.
I understand obviously the structure in the site's changed a little bit since the end of the first project. So how have you adapted your approach whilst maintaining the standards that were set in place?
So we've gone from 4 to 2 managers on shifts. So I look after 2 shifts, and Ross Foreman looks after the other 2 shifts. We've incorporated like a Gemba walk of sorts, where we walk the site in the morning just to check up on all the standards from the previous night and day, which is just checking, make sure the commission buys are done, make sure the areas are tidy, Just keep an eye on how many out of service spots we are, if we're going in the right direction. Just picking things up in general that we can get done that day, so things that we can add to the PDCA board that are just quick fixes. So yeah, it's definitely something that we didn't do before, which has definitely helped off the back of the Kaizen project.
And would you say, obviously you've got the day-to-day operation that you look after and you're very closely involved with, would you say that now the continuous improvement is sort of part of the routine? It's almost part of the natural behaviour of not just your role but your team's role?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's some ways to go with certain aspects of it, but definitely the foundations are there, like the morning start shift brief, that everyone attends it, we all go follow the same structure. Like if I'm on a handover or a day where I'm seeing both shifts that I don't normally see, they're still following the same structure. But yeah, it's definitely given us something to think. It's given us the right things to think about. Even with this second phase, it's questions that we may have left to the side, and just by the time it gets to us, it's like a mountain. So it's good to be on top of these things, and that's what I think is the best thing about the Kaizen project. It makes everyone think and at least focus on trying to make things better.
Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed the behind the scenes here at Ocado. We'd like to thank Ocado for hosting us today and sharing some of their experiences working alongside Kaizen Institute.